And then tell us about the exit. What happened?
So a lot of sleepless nights happened.
In this episode, you're going to learn about Matt Wilkinson, a successful founder and product leader who's currently working on the bleeding edge of AI development. Matt has a super interesting background. He started as an engineer at Johnson & Johnson while building his own company, ShoeFitr, as a side hustle. This innovative footwear fitting service leveraged 3D modeling and was eventually acquired by Amazon, where Matt stayed on as a senior product manager. You'll hear how Matt's grit as an engineer and problem solver unlocked a career as a founder. And make sure you stick around into the end, where we will unpack Matt's career playbook, a blueprint for becoming a better product leader with lessons you can start applying right away. I'd like to start by just hearing a little bit about what your first job was.
Yeah, my first job was a camp counselor for 3 and 4-year-olds, teaching them soccer. It was probably the hardest job I've ever had. I think I'd go out there with like a 3-hour plan, and inevitably it like lasted 30 minutes. And kids are rough, man. They'll let you know if you're not bringing your A game.
How'd you find it? How did you decide you wanted to go do that?
Typical high school kid looking for, an easy-ish summer. So I thought, I think I did that, and I painted a pergola as well. And that was awful. The number of rungs on this pergola was insane. I don't think I actually finished the job. I think, at some point, summer was coming to an end, and the client was like, "Okay, why don't you guys get out of my backyard? You've had enough here." So, but yeah, those were my first summer jobs.
What did you do after college?
So I went into college really having no real game plan. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I like building things. I liked solving problems. So I was like, all right, I'll be an engineer. I'm decent enough at physics and math. Most college kids. I was just totally behind the 8 ball when it comes to on-campus recruiting. And so, one of the few jobs remaining, all my friends are getting, these jobs on Wall Street, making a lot of money, or they're, big engineering firms. And the only thing that was kind of left for me was this small 3D imaging company in Connecticut. And I was running out of time. So I was like, all right, I'll try this out. And, the technology was really cool. It was a 4-person company, but it honestly turned out to be one of the most profound experiences, totally shaped my whole career. Well, not only was the technology really interesting, we worked on all these different applications like reverse engineering, rapid prototyping, all these kind of really cool things. But I also got to wear so many hats. I was salesperson pitching the Fortune 500s right out of school. I was kind of taken under the wing of the CEO, and he really kind of showed me the ropes of how to run a business. Got to do all the engineering work and on application side, and also kind of the deeper tech side. So it was a really cool experience, and that's actually. From that, I started my first company, and one of the things I was working on there was working with podiatric patients. So patients who need foot insoles. So the old way of doing it is what you would put your foot into this kind of mold. And so with our 3D imaging technology, we took away the mold, and you can scan the bottom of people's feet to create custom insoles. And I thought this is really cool tech. There's something kind of engaging about seeing something in 3D, being able to manipulate it on a computer or whatever. And I had this idea of all right, how can we bring this to mass retail? And had this idea of kind of creating this kind of 3D scanning kiosk where you scan the bottoms of people's feet and allow them to get fitting in store. Also have this profile online for future e-commerce fitting. But then also maybe mass custom insoles or things like that at a retail price. So we pitched it around. Unfortunately, it didn't get any traction, but I learned a whole lot, and it kind of. I think that was the first thing that kind of set up this drive of entrepreneurship, because both the experience at that first company I worked at, I just love the idea of strategizing around technology and product and business to kind of figure out how to get something to market, how to be competitive. And that experience kind of unleashed this kind of drive in me for pursuing startups in the future.
You have all this equipment, you're building a couple different prototypes, and then you're pitching it. What did you learn through that process?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I learned is you gotta try to finish things all the way through. Now going forward, it's I don't like to quit something unless I've learned something about myself, or I've learned a very clear this isn't going to work in this market. I feel I got enough of that signal, but then it was kind of taking a while, and I wound up getting a job at Johnson & Johnson working on medical devices.
Got it. So you were at your own startup, and was it just you, or did you have a couple other people that you were doing this with?
So it was just me, but while I was at Johnson & Johnson working on medical devices, I just couldn't keep this idea away. It was just kind of haunting me. And I was I just feel we didn't kind of nail it right. And I remember going to a brick and mortar running store, just kind of doing some research, and kind of a light bulb a little bit went off when I went through their fitting experience with their sales agent. The first question they asked me was like, "What shoe do you currently wear?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Like people don't know fit based on like how many millimeters their big toes away from the end of the shoe. Like this might be a more scalable way to start this. If you start with someone's shoe that they're currently wearing, okay, that's a great reference point to fitting to something else, right? They wear it day in, day out. They're very familiar with that experience. Maybe that's a way to kind of unlock this scale type of challenge that we had. So I started running this idea by a good buddy of mine from school. He was like a big runner and, also just a great person to kind of run ideas off of. Finally, he was like, yeah, let's pursue this. Let's do this. And he needed to get his friend on board as well. As a computer science guy that could kind of help us on the back end. But that is, it's probably the hardest. I always tell people that's like the hardest sale you'll ever have to make is your co-founder. It's the most important one as well, right?
So this is ShoeFitr, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And so you're still at J&J, still doing your day job. And then in the evenings and on weekends, you are with your 3D scanner, essentially scanning all of the insides of these shoes to start building out your data set.
Yeah, I was scanning shoes. Nick was doing some of the analytical work. I sent it over to him, and Breck was doing all like the engineering thing on his side. Being able to extract measurements and doing like curve smoothing, all this kind of stuff until we kind of had this initial prototype. Essentially, I went to a brick and mortar store, like a local running store. I was like, hey, I'm building this site, like I'm trying to create this fitting application. And I'll offer this for free if you let me in your kind of back room and let me scan your shoes.
Yeah.
And and the manager of the store is like, yeah, go right ahead. And so I started scanning a bunch of shoes. Maybe like 2 days later, the owner of the store comes in. He like sees me. I guess he didn't get the note that I was going to be back there. He's like, what are you doing? And so he kicked me out of his store, but I got to keep the data, which was important. So that's kind of how we initially got started, just scrappy, building up this this network of shoes, and there's a lot of challenges with what we were doing, but that's kind of how we got our start.
I think one of the things that you called out that's really interesting is that insight that you had that if you use that existing shoe as the baseline, you're going to have a much better and faster way to get a fit. How did that insight come about? I mean, you mentioned you kind of had this aha moment. Was there something that inspired that aha moment?
Yeah, so I'd gone to retail stores, like doing research, and I was always kind of annoyed that they'd ask me this question, but then they'd wind up putting me in like something that felt like enormous, so like a really large shoe. And I was a soccer player, so I just like that really like tight feel. And then also my buddy Nick, he was a great runner, and even though our foot sizes were very different, he wore a size that was like the same as mine, but you could like fit like a Matchbox car in there and he wouldn't even feel it. So, that kind of made me realize like, okay, like fit is not it's based on like your preference, your experience. Right. And so that was, I think, kind of more like the aha moment of how to start at that baseline.
Let's dive in. I think this is a natural segue into, some of the key moments that defined your career. But what happened next with ShoeFitr? How did you guys scale? Tell us a little bit about what ultimately happened there.
So a lot of sleepless nights happened. But no, we were in touch. I think the corporate dev team at Amazon at some point reached out to us. They had seen what we were doing. We were on a lot of their competitors' sites. And Amazon was just all about like creating the best customer experience. It was kind of like the Web 2.0 era. I mean, Zappos had come out with NPR came out with this report on Zappos about like the cost of returns, and the green side of it, how like unsustainable it was, and plus, it felt like just very barbaric, right? You buy a shoe, send it back, and kind of repeat that over and over until you find a good fit. And so, I think Amazon wanted to win the customers over, right? They loved our customer experience compared to the other competitors that were out there. We did a lot of the work, hard work on the back end, by scanning all these shoes so the customer could have a really kind of frictionless experience, right? They simply had to enter their shoe and size that they wore, and they got this nice experience versus, some of the companies were doing these like ML soup type of comparisons where they're, asking for your weight and height and shoe size and give me 5 brands you like. And it just took a while. And, especially with free returns, customers just want something snappy, right? I think that plus, some of the bigger customers that we nailed, I think really kind of pushed them to initially want to invest, but then, ultimately acquire us.
Tell us about that. What did you do at Amazon?
Sure. So at Amazon, the first job was integrating our technology into Amazon. From the acquisition. And so I was kind of business manager of the Softlines tech group. responsible for the virtual fitting applications. So I worked on a number of different like projects there. We were working, getting towards clothing and things like that. So trying to really expand it into other areas. After doing that for a couple of years, I moved to Alexa voice shopping. Like one of my real goals at Amazon, in addition to, integrating our technology and having that be successful, was really just to give this opportunity to deep dive into being a product manager at Amazon, at the best place, in the world to do that. And, given the size of the business, there's so many different products, so many different, areas to explore. So I tried to take advantage of that. And so I went to Alexa voice shopping, and this was like in the very early days. I recall a lot of like sleepless nights during Prime Day. We were trying to like push people to use voice shopping, and everything was kind of duct taped together still there. So that was a fun experience. And then after doing that for a bit, I went to kind of this new kind of startup within Amazon in consumer healthcare called Amazon Halo, and was one of the early PMs on that team before it scaled up to be much larger.
What did you learn at Amazon, and how have the learnings that you got there, how have those shaped your career since then?
I think the biggest thing was kind of a mantra there at Amazon. Just like whenever there's like something tough or, hard problem to solve or disagreement or something uncomfortable, just like run right after it, right? Run right towards it. And I think that kind of helped kind of flesh out a lot of the challenges and problems kind of early on. So you had more clarity of like kind of the trajectory of where this can go and the feasibility and things like that. I mean, that's something I still kind of keep with me to this day. And that's, also an area where, like running up those things that are, make you uncomfortable, perhaps it's just great growth opportunity.
What were some of the big risks that you encountered throughout your career that, you faced and were able to either, overcome or not overcome and, deal with the aftermath?
One of the biggest risks is like putting yourself out there, right? I mean, I'm a very, introverted person. I don't like the attention. This in itself is hard.
I know.
Mostly,
we appreciate you doing it.
Not so much for you, a little bit because of you, but mostly me. So I think that's the big thing, is like being able to put yourself out there, take rejection. There's always like an inherent risk with that, right? I think when it comes to like pursuing a startup, it's like, it's all about risk allocation, right? Like I think products that are easier to build, like, product market fit risk or competitive risk, and, for maybe more like deep tech, frontier tech type of stuff, it's all going to be, on the front end, does it work type of risk.
And what's been your approach to getting funding for, your startups like Sidetrack?
Yeah. So we're right now part of AI2 Incubator. So that's where we have a little bit of funding and a lot of resources at our disposal. And then, looking to raise capital once we can kind of get over the hurdle and be able to demonstrate in a very, undeniable way that this works, and there has potential for a big impact on some of these big bottlenecks with scaling AI.
Moving on to the next section, which we call the blueprint. Matt, what are 3 of the most important things you've learned in your career?
Obviously keep working on something until you feel like you've learned something about yourself, or learn something about the market that's not working out, right? Have some sort of closure at the end of it, otherwise you'll drive yourself nuts. Yeah, and I think also hold yourself to the highest standards when you're working with people. Again, nobody's going to remember like what you've accomplished, or again care about what you've accomplished. It's just kind of like how do you take care of those relationships, and how do you work with other people? That's what people seem to care about more, right? I mean, starting a company or any initiative is just hard. So might as well pick something really big, right? I think going after big ideas has always been something that is interesting to me, like being new to world on certain products or technology. So I think, I know it's like an Amazon one, but I think it kind of holds true to my life now. Again, like I think a bias for action, diving deep and just like kind of going after, whatever, it is you want to pursue. Like the risk of not doing something is always higher than the risk of, staying with what you're doing, right?
Thanks for watching. If you like this episode, make sure you like and subscribe so that the next episode hits your feed. And if you missed our last episode, you can check out the link right here. In that episode, I chatted with Aliona, who is the former Chief Product Officer of Prisma Labs. She ran and launched a mega viral app in 2022 that you probably remember as Magic Avatars. You'll hear about how a 2-week sprint led to millions of downloads and Prisma obtaining the #1 spot on the App Store. Click here to learn more.